There's a man about to sign a check, and his hand should be shaking. He runs a company worth almost $2 billion. One of the great success stories of the internet, the kind of business they write case studies about. And right now, he's about to hand a fortune to a young programmer. A stranger, really. Someone who, just a few months earlier, sat alone and built the thing that told the entire world his company might already be finished. Think about how strange that is. You don't pay the person who proved you're obsolete. You don't hand them hundreds of millions of dollars and say, "Thank you." Unless you've realized that the thing they built is the only lifeboat left, and the only way to survive it is to own it. So watch that check being signed, because it's one of the strangest deals in recent tech history. A giant paying a fortune to the person who just made it look unnecessary. And that's the question this whole story turns on. Why would one of the most successful software companies on Earth pay a small fortune for a 6-month-old startup built by, essentially, one guy that proves the giant's original product might not be needed anymore? Because here's what the company had spent more than a decade doing. It had taken something that used to be hard and expensive and locked behind people who knew how to code, building a website, and made it so easy that anyone could do it. Drag, drop, done. It gave millions of ordinary people the power to build something they had no idea how to build. And it made close to $2 billion a year doing it. It looked unstoppable. It looked permanent. The kind of company you assume will just always be there. And then, in a matter of months, the market decided it was dead. Now, you've probably seen a version of this story already. Somebody made a video, a big number in the thumbnail. Down 90%, the collapse, made irrelevant overnight. The rise and fall, roll the credits. But that's not what happened, not really. Because if you actually look at the numbers, not the stock, the numbers, the word collapse doesn't fit at all. Something much stranger is going on. Something that's less about a company dying and more about a question that should terrify every business you think of as safe. What happens when the thing you sell, the hard thing you made easy, suddenly becomes something anyone can get just by asking? To understand it, we have to go back before the crash, back to when this company looked impossible to kill. So stay with me, because it starts with a number that sounds like pure triumph and ends with a giant paying a fortune to buy the weapon aimed at its own heart. To feel how strange the fall was, you first have to feel how big the climb had been. This company is called Wix, and if you've ever thought about building a website for a business, a portfolio, a little side project, you've almost certainly seen it. It's one of the handful of companies that turned making a website from a technical nightmare into something you could do on a lazy Sunday afternoon. And the growth was staggering. Since 2011, Wix's revenue grew by more than 7,700%. Let that number sit for a second. Not 77%, not 700. More than 7,700. It climbed year after year until it was pulling in close to $2 billion a year. That's not a lucky startup. That's a decade of relentless, compounding success. The kind of track record that makes investors feel safe. The kind that makes a company look like furniture, like it'll just always be there, quietly making money forever. And then came the fall that everybody's talking about. Wix's stock, the price of owning a piece of the company, fell off a cliff. In just the first half of 2026, it dropped 56%. More than half its value gone in 6 months. And measured from its highest point, the stock was down around 85%. 85%. That's the number the thumbnails round up and call 90%. That's the collapse. That's where the word comes from. And if the stock price were the whole story, it really would be a collapse. A giant brought to its knees. The end. But here's where it gets strange. Here's the part that almost nobody stops to explain. Because while the stock was falling off a cliff, the actual business was still climbing. Read that again, because it's the crack the whole story slips through. The stock crashed. The company didn't. The revenue kept growing. In the first quarter, Wix's revenue was up 14% to $541 million. That's not a dying company's number. That's growth. Solid, healthy, boring growth. More customers, more money, more of everything you'd want. So sit with the contradiction, because it's the engine of this whole thing. The market said this company is finished, slashed its value by 85%. And at the very same time, the company itself was calmly reporting, "We're growing." Both of those things were true, on the same day, about the same company. So, somebody was wrong. Either the market was panicking over a ghost, punishing a healthy business for a threat that wasn't real, or the market was seeing something the revenue numbers hadn't caught up to yet. Something coming. Something that hadn't hit the balance sheet, but would. And to figure out which one it was, you have to understand exactly what the market was so afraid of. Because it wasn't a bad quarter. It wasn't a scandal. It was a technology. One that had just appeared seemingly out of nowhere. And it pointed straight at the one thing Wix was built to sell.
To understand the threat, you have to understand exactly what Wix sold. Because it wasn't really websites. Go back 20 years. If you wanted a website, a real one, for your business, you had a problem. Websites were built out of code, strange, unforgiving lines of text that most people couldn't read, let alone write. So you had two options. You learned to code, which took months or years, or you paid someone who already had, and that person was expensive and slow and spoke a language you didn't understand. For most ordinary people, a website was simply out of reach. There was a wall, and on the far side of that wall were all the people who knew the secret language. And then Wix, along with a few others, did something quietly radical. It tore the wall down. It said, "You don't need the language anymore. You don't need to code. Just drag this box here, drop that photo there, type your words," and in an afternoon, a person who knew nothing about how a website actually works could build one that looked professional. That was the magic. That was the whole empire. Wix wasn't selling websites. It was selling the ability to build something you didn't know how to build. It was selling the feeling of stepping over that wall without ever learning to climb. And people paid for it, happily, forever, millions of them. Because the alternative, learning to code or paying a developer, was so much worse. For more than a decade, that was an unbeatable position, because the wall was still there. Wix hadn't destroyed the wall, it had just built the only comfortable door through it. And as long as coding stayed hard, that door was worth a fortune. But here's the thing about walls. They only protect you as long as they stand. And then, almost overnight, a new kind of technology appeared. People started calling it vibe coding. And the idea behind it is deceptively simple. You no longer drag and drop. You no longer learn anything. You just talk. You describe in plain English the website or the app you want. Build me a store that sells candles with a photo gallery and a checkout. And the artificial intelligence builds it, writes the actual code, all of it, while you watch. Wall Street understood what that meant immediately. The theme, stated plainly by analysts, was blunt. New AI tools would simply replace specific software like Wix. And now look at the trap Wix was in. Really look at it, because it's the cruelest kind. Wix got rich by making it easy to build without knowing how to code. And vibe coding makes the exact same promise. Easy to build without knowing how to code. Except it goes further. Cheaper, faster. No dragging, no dropping, no learning the Wix way of doing things either. Just a conversation. The weapon pointed at Wix wasn't some foreign invader. It was Wix's own idea, the whole reason Wix existed, taken one enormous step further. Wix had spent a decade lowering the wall, and vibe coding just erased it completely. Which raises a question Wix now had to answer, fast. If anyone can build a website just by asking, what exactly is Wix for? And the answer to that question would arrive from the last place anyone expected. Not from a giant competitor, from a single person working alone who had just built the future in his spare time.
His name is Maor Shlomo, and the story of what he built is almost hard to believe. To understand where he was coming from, you have to know one detail. He built the thing not in a comfortable office, not with a team of engineers and a pile of investor money, but in the aftermath of war. He'd just come off a long stretch of military reserve duty in Israel following the October attacks. And in that strange, raw window afterward, he sat down and started building. What he built was called Base 44, and it was a vibe coding tool, exactly the kind of thing Wall Street was terrified of. You talk to it, you describe what you want, and it builds you a real, working application. No code, no dragging, just words. Now here's where the numbers stop sounding real. He launched it at the start of the year, and in less than 6 months, Base 44 went from nothing, from zero, to more than 400,000 users, and around $3.5 million in revenue. It hit its first $1 million in recurring revenue in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. It became profitable, and through almost all of it, Maor Shlomo was running the whole thing essentially by himself. I want to be fair and precise here because the solo genius story is always a little too clean. He wasn't literally alone the entire way. By the time it was all over, Base 44 had grown to about 8 employees. But 8, not 800, not 80, 8 people to build a tool that had one of the most powerful software companies on Earth genuinely frightened. Sit with the scale of that gap. On one side, Wix, more than a decade of work, thousands of employees, close to $2 billion a year, an entire empire built to make websites easy. And on the other side, one young programmer, fresh out of reserve duty, who in 6 months built a thing that did the same job, arguably better, while barely sleeping. That is the moment the ground shifted. Not because Base 44 was bigger than Wix. It wasn't, not even close. But because of what it proved. It proved that the wall Wix had spent a decade guarding could now be knocked down by a single person in a few months. It proved the moat was gone, and the whole world of software felt it. Because if one person can do this in 6 months, alone, bootstrapped, with no big funding, then what is any of the giants actually protecting? What's the wall worth if a stranger can vaporize it from his bedroom? So now put yourself in the shoes of the people running Wix. You've built this enormous thing,
and you're watching a 20-something with 8 employees prove that the thing you sell can now be conjured out of thin air with a sentence. You have 3 choices. You can ignore it and pray it's a fad. You can try to build your own version and race 100 hungry startups who move faster than you ever could. Or you can do the third thing, the strange thing, the thing that looks like either the smartest move in the company's history or a quiet confession that the game is already over. You can buy it.
So that's what Wix did. It bought the weapon. In the summer of 2025, Wix acquired Base 44, the 6-month-old company, the one built by one guy and a handful of others. The price, up front, was around $80 million in cash. And of that $80 million, about $25 million was set aside as retention money, bonuses to make sure the tiny team, all 8 of them, actually stuck around instead of walking off with the check. Stop and feel how strange that is. A company with a decade of history and thousands of employees paying tens of millions to make sure 8 people don't leave. That tells you what Wix thought it was really buying, not the software, the minds that made it. But why? Why buy the very thing that threatens you instead of just fighting it? Here's the logic, and on paper, it's genuinely clever. Wix looked at vibe coding and realized something the panicking market had missed. A tool like Base 44 can build you an app in a conversation, but building it is only step 1. After that, the thing has to actually live somewhere. It has to be hosted, kept secure, made to handle payments, kept legal with all the privacy rules, marketed, maintained. All the boring, heavy, unglamorous infrastructure that makes a website an actual business instead of a toy. And that infrastructure? That's exactly what Wix had spent a decade building. In the company's own words, Wix could provide the robust infrastructure that vibe coding platforms need to scale. The hosting, the security, the payments, the compliance, the marketing tools. So the plan was elegant. Let the AI be the flashy front door, the magic conversation that builds the site, and let Wix be the entire house behind it. Buy the weapon and bolt it on to the empire. Turn the thing that could have killed you into your newest, sharpest product. And at first, it worked beautifully. Once it was plugged into Wix, Base 44 didn't slow down. It accelerated. It had been doing just a few million in recurring revenue when the deal closed. Within months, it was on track to hit $40, even $50 million a year. Wix was growing so fast because of it that the company actually raised its own revenue forecast. The acquisition looked like a masterstroke. The giant had seen the asteroid coming, and instead of getting hit, it had reached out and caught it. So there it is, the satisfying ending, the one that makes you nod. The wise old giant, threatened by the future, simply reaches out and buys the future and bolts it on and sails safely through. Crisis averted, genius rewarded. The stock will recover, the doubters will look foolish, and Wix will be stronger than ever. The end. Except it isn't. Because buying the weapon is not the same as being safe from it, and the price of that weapon did not stop at $80 million. It kept climbing, quietly, relentlessly, toward a number and a problem that would make the whole clever plan look very different. Because the $80 million was never the real price. It was just the down payment. The way these deals work, the $80 million was only what Wix paid on day 1. The full price was tied to how well Base 44 performed over the years that followed. A series of earn-out payments, promising the founder more and more money the more his creation grew. And Base 44 grew, fast. So the meter started running. By the time you add it all up, the payments already made, plus the ones still coming, stretching out to 2029, the true cost of Base 44 climbs past $200 million. More than $200 million. For a company that, on the day it was bought, had only about $10 million in annual recurring revenue. And it kept climbing.
In its most recent results, Wix revealed it would owe the founder, Maor Shlomo, another $41 million, because Base 44 had blown past the targets they'd set. Add up everything paid so far, and the total already sales past $150 million. But the money going out the door wasn't even the deepest problem, because in that same set of results, Wix reported something more worrying. Its losses had widened to more than $76 million. And a big reason why was Base 44 itself. The very thing it bought to save itself was now expensive to run, burning through enormous computing costs just to answer everyone's requests, and demanding heavy spending on marketing because the vibe coding world had become a knife fight, with rivals pouring in and competition getting more brutal by the month. So look at what Wix had actually done. It had spotted the asteroid, reached out to catch it, and caught it. But the asteroid was still burning, and now Wix was holding it with both hands. And here's the deepest question, the one at the very bottom of this whole story. If vibe coding really is the future, if talking to an AI really does replace the old way of building, then what did Wix actually buy? It bought a faster path to the exact world where its original product, the drag-and-drop empire, isn't needed anymore. It may have spent over $200 million to help the future arrive sooner. The future that makes the old Wix obsolete. It bought the weapon aimed at its heart, and then paid to keep it sharp. But, and this is where I have to be fair because the truth genuinely has two sides, that dark reading might be completely wrong. Because plenty of very smart people look at all of this and see the opposite. They see a company that isn't dying at all. Remember the numbers from the start. The revenue is still growing. The business generates more than $500 million in free cash flow. And by that math, a lot of analysts don't see a corpse, they see a bargain. They call the crash a buy the dip. A healthy, profitable company punished too hard by a panicking market that happened to move early and buy itself a genuine seat at the future's table. And here's the honest truth. Nobody knows yet which story is real. It's still being written. It might turn out to be one of the smartest defensive moves in tech history, a giant that saw the wave and learned to surf it. Or it might be a very expensive way of paying for your own funeral. The uncertainty isn't a flaw in the story. The uncertainty is the story.
So let me bring this back to the two men we started with, because the whole story really lives in the gap between them. On one side, the man signing the checks, Avishai Abrahami, who built Wix into an empire and then had to make the hardest bet of his career, spending a fortune to buy the very thing that threatens everything he built. Whether that makes him a genius or a man paying for his own funeral, he can't know yet. Nobody can. He made the bet anyway, because standing still was the only guaranteed way to lose. And on the other side, the young programmer, Maor Shlomo, who walked out of military reserve duty, sat down, and in 6 months built something a $2 billion company had to buy just to breathe. And here's the detail that says everything. He didn't sell because he was failing. He sold because he was succeeding too fast to keep up. In his own words, the scale and the volume he suddenly needed weren't something he could grow into on his own. He'd built the future in his bedroom, and it got too big for the bedroom in 6 months. Sit with that, because it's the real story. Bigger than Wix, bigger than one stock falling. For most of history, building something a giant would pay a fortune for took years. It took teams and offices and investors and time. There was a natural speed limit on how fast one person could matter. And that speed limit was itself a kind of wall. It protected the giants. It meant the big, slow, established companies had time to see threats coming, because threats took years to grow. That wall is now gone too. Vibe coding didn't just threaten Wix, it compressed the time it takes for one person to build something world-shaking from years
down to months. A single person with the right idea and these new tools can now go from nothing to a threat a giant has to buy before that giant has even finished its next quarterly report. And that should make you look differently at every empire you assume is permanent. Because Wix's whole business was selling a hard thing made easy. And its lesson, the one written in that 85% drop and that $200 million check, is that maybe the fate of every "we'll do it for you" business is the day "just do it yourself by talking" finally gets good enough. The moat you spent a decade digging can be crossed now by one person in a season. So I'll leave you with the question I keep turning over. And I mean it. Tell me what you think. When a giant buys the very thing that makes it obsolete, is that survival or is it a confession? Did Wix catch the future, or did it just pay to bring its own ending closer? And the harder one, the one I really want you to sit with, how many of the empires you think of as permanent, the apps, the tools, the companies you'd bet on lasting forever, are just one 6-month project by one person you've never heard of, away from becoming unnecessary? Tell me. I'll be reading.